We need to make this as unattractive as possible to sell this drug.
Tonight, a grief-stricken father makes a plea for change.
Treaties are international agreements with the British Crown and First Nation people, and our ancestors signed those treaties in good faith.
Plus, King Charles III will be crowned this weekend. What are Indigenous leaders saying?
This is now the moment in time that will dictate how we power our communities for the next 7 generations.
And Indigenous youth brainstorm clean energy solutions in Cape Breton.
Good evening, Tansei Anin. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Family and friends of a 31-year-old Winnipeg man who died after taking tainted drugs in the Paw have been tending a sacred fire for him. Now, as they prepare for Harlan Foray's funeral this weekend, his father hopes his son's death will spark change. APTN's Leanne Sanders reports.
I take comfort in knowing that his journey was well lit. You know, having the music, the drum playing on a constant, knowing that he had the songs of our ancestors to listen to as he walked to the other side.
Joe Foray has placed the final log on a sacred fire for his son Harlan, who overdosed in the Paw after using drugs tainted with fentanyl. 6 other people also took the tainted drugs, but recovered. RCMP in the Paw put out a warning about the drugs, but that came too late for Harlan. Foray says Harlan was not an addict, something many assumed on hearing he'd overdosed. While there's been a dramatic increase in overdose deaths in Manitoba in the last number of years, Foray says the numbers are just part of the story.
I think it was 467 deaths last year, double from 2019, well, more than double from 2019. But those numbers don't tell the whole story. You know, those numbers don't tell us how many of those were one and done, trying it for the first time.
Foray believes there should be harsher penalties for those trafficking in fentanyl.
I think mandatory sentencing needs to be put in place. We need to make this as unattractive as possible to sell this drug. I know they have mandatory sentencing for cocaine, which doesn't probably kill as many people as fentanyl does.
Harlan Foray's Indigenous name was Singing Red Bear, and Joe hopes his son's death will carry the message far that with fentanyl, one time may be too many.
I think now it's time for that voice that he left us behind with to sing loudly, to educate others that it's okay to say no thanks, and we need to start saying no thanks.
The funeral for Harlan Foray is this Saturday. The casket of the Winnipeg Jets fan will bear a custom star blanket with the team's logo. For Joe, he hopes people will remember his son, not for the way he died, but for how he lived.
I'm very proud of my son. He was a really good man, and he didn't deserve this.
Leanne Sanders, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
The tribunal into allegations of abuse by some staff members of the Immaculate Day School in Burns Lake, British Columbia continued today. APTN's online reporter Kathleen Martins joins us now with the day's events. Kathleen, thanks again for joining us here. First off, how's the RCMP investigation faring under the close look by the tribunal?
Well, you know, it doesn't sound too well to those of us who are listening. The one of the survivors, Richard Perry, said, you know, a couple of Mounties came to his house. It was 2013. Interviewed him for about 24 minutes. Didn't ask a lot of questions, and he never heard from them again. We heard that from another survivor that the RCMP closed their investigation in 2013. It didn't lead to any criminal charges, and they didn't talk to any other survivors afterwards. At least that's what they say. The RCMP deny that, but we won't hear more from them until the coming weeks when they're going to be interviewed or heard. You know, they'll testify.
Well, and Kathleen, of course, the alleged abuser's identity is under a publication ban. So how difficult has it been to report on that and while staying within the limits of the ban?
Yeah, it's been a bit tricky. We at APTN, we're familiar with this story, but we have to write it now in a brand new way. Also, his name is said a lot during the hearing, and we all know who they're talking about, but because he isn't there to defend himself, it's not a court of law. He's not charged with anything. He has always denied these allegations. To be fair, the tribunal said, we won't use your name. We can use some general initials, AB, but it has been, I would say it's been tricky.
Well, and you've joined us the last few days here with some updates. So what is next as this progresses?
Yeah, well, the reporter, investigative journalist Laura Robinson is on the stand. She's from Ontario, and she's the one these survivors broke their silence to. They had been living with the abuse that they say they experienced at Immaculata Day School, 50 years ago. No one had ever come and talked to them about it. When they heard someone was actually interested, they started lining up. When she first came up here to Burns Lake, she said there were more than 30 people waiting to talk to her at the band office. And she made numerous trips back. She's testified to gather statements and information. We're talking, generations of families who've experienced this abuse and are finally able to talk about it publicly. I do want to add, though, Daryl, that there are other pro-Catholic people in the community who don't think it's a good idea to bring this up. They don't want it disclosed publicly. And so it's caused a rift, and it's been tough for some of the survivors because they know they're not fully supported.
Well, Kathleen, certainly great work by you as always, and plenty of great updates. So thank you so much for this.
Oh, you're welcome, Daryl. Thank you.
Thunder Bay Police have released dramatic video of a shootout that happened in the middle of the day yesterday. The video was released as police announced that a Toronto man has been charged with attempted murder in the incident. The video shows gunfire being exchanged between numerous parties before they flee. A responding officer later noticed a suspect matching the description provided by witnesses. The male fled from police on foot, but a male suspect was soon arrested. Officers located a quantity of crack cocaine and a handgun in the male's possession. 20-year-old Iverson Thomas of Toronto is charged with attempt to commit murder using a restricted or prohibited firearm, possession of cocaine for the purpose of trafficking, and a handful of firearms-related charges. Police are still seeking other suspects. A trial over a treaty right to harvest continued in a Dartmouth, Nova Scotia provincial court today, where two Migma harvesters face fishery charges. After yesterday's testimony by a Department of Fisheries and Oceans officer, their lawyer introduced a motion saying their rights were infringed. Angel Moore explains.
I'm here outside the Dartmouth Provincial Court, where two Migma fishermen, Kevin Bernard and Craig Baptiste of the Eskazoni First Nation, face fishery charges stemming from May 5th, 2020. They allegedly harvested baby eels, also called elvers. At the time of the arrest, the Department of Fisheries and Oceans had shut down the fishery due to violence and unrest. Elvers can be worth $5,000 a kilogram. On Wednesday, defense lawyer Jeremiah Rainingbird filed a charter application saying his clients were arrested without grounds and their constitutional rights were infringed. This after a DFO officer testified on Tuesday that the arrest was made because the officer believed an offense was about to occur.
They lacked objective grounds to arrest anyone. They essentially testified that they had arrested Mr. Batiste simply for having an empty bucket, an empty net, and going up a hill. And Mr. Bernard similarly was arrested with a lack of any evidence at the time of arrest that he had committed any offense.
Crown Prosecutor Sarah Newton disagreed and will request the court dismiss the charter application when court resumes on July 25th. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia.
The future of clean energy in Canada is in good hands as Indigenous youth from across the country gather in Cape Breton this week to learn from Indigenous clean energy experts. Through Indigenous Clean Energy's annual 2020 Catalysts program, 24 participants, known as Catalysts, will learn how to become clean energy leaders by engaging in renewable energy projects throughout the country. The ultimate goal of the program is for participants to bring their knowledge back to their communities to create projects of their own. Michael Polak is a program participant and the executive director for Pictou Landing First Nation. He says it's critical that Indigenous voices guide the future of clean energy.
Look at what's happening around the world. It's one of the largest mobilization of industry that's happened since maybe, world wars or something, right?
Wow.
And so it's really critically important that we're helping to guide this, because this is now the moment in time that will dictate how we power our communities for the next 7 generations. And there's a lot of value that we can add to the way that this stuff takes place.
All right, we have to step aside for a short break. When we come back, as Charles prepares to take the crown, Indigenous leaders weigh in.
When King Charles III was still prince, he spoke of the importance of reconciliation.
Welcome back to APTN National News. May 6th is the coronation of King Charles III. He automatically became king upon the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, last September. Earlier this week, Charles told Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that reconciliation is a priority of his. As he ascends the throne, he also becomes the Supreme Governor of the Anglican Church, which ran around 36 recognized residential schools across the country. During a visit to Yellowknife in May of 2022, the Assembly of First Nations and the Métis National Council called for the then Prince to apologize for the Crown's role in the schools. He acknowledged the pain of survivors, but left without an apology. Some of these same leaders, along with the first Indigenous Governor General Mary Simon, will privately meet with the King tomorrow to talk about reconciliation. And with all eyes on King Charles' coronation this weekend, Indigenous leaders are weighing in. Assembly of First Nations Grand Chief Kathleen Merrick joined us earlier this week. Grand Chief Merrick, thank you so much for joining us today. What will you be looking for in this new relationship with the Crown?
I, as Grand Chief, will be looking for the new relationship with the Crown, with the King, to ensure that we talk about treaties, our treaties that are historic, and our relationship with the Crown that is historic.
And Grand Chief, how can King Charles signal that there is a new era ahead with Indigenous peoples?
Well, when King Charles III was still Prince, he spoke of the importance of reconciliation and the need for a renewed relationship with Indigenous peoples. So it remains to be seen what role he sees for himself as king and as a treaty partner to many of our Indigenous nations.
Now, there's also a new Indigenous Governor General. How will that sort of influence the relationship going forward with the King?
Well, I believe that we're all put in our positions for a purpose. I believe that she was put in that position for a purpose, to be able to speak and to be able to relay to the King on what's happening with Indigenous people in this country.
And last one for you here, Grand Chief. Why is it still important to acknowledge the nation-to-nation relationship in terms of treaty rights?
Well, treaties are international agreements with the British Crown and First Nation people, and our ancestors signed those treaties in good faith. And the government, the Crown has a fiduciary responsibility for our people. It was in the treaties that they would take care of us, that they would look after us, and that hasn't happened. And we need to be able to speak, and we need to be able to move forward and ensure that our children as well are, that we look after our children for the future. And within this whole process, and with the understanding of treaties in this country, it hasn't been to the extent that it should have been, where as well that we talk a lot about our lands, and historically our people, our ancestors welcome people to our lands. They welcomed them with open arms, and that we would be able to share. We never gave up our rights. We never ceded to anything in terms of our lands and whatnot. So the discussions that should happen is the land issue discussion, and resource revenue sharing, and the control of our own citizenship. So those are just some issues that I would love to talk about in terms of where we're going to go with our treaty relationship with the Crown.
And we'll certainly be watching how the relationship unfolds. Grand Chief, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I said Grand Chief. Merrick was the Grand Chief of the Assembly of First Nations. She is, of course, the Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. So I apologize for that. All right, we have to put a pause on the program one more time. Our photo of the day and weather are next. Plus, game one of the playoffs between the Edmonton Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights kicks off with a Convoy in Edmonton.
It's going to be a good series, but the Edmonton Oilers are going to take care of business.
Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Dana Kelly shared this photo of the Grand Ole Kenesota Opry held in the Métis community of Kenesota, Manitoba. Here is Lee Sin Johnson performing as Dolly Parton. Thanks so much, Dana, for that. If you have a great photo, you can send it to share@aptn.ca, and it might just be our next photo of the day. All right, now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast.
We begin on the East Coast, 1 degree and clear in St. John's and 8 in Halifax. -9 in Nain and -1 in Happy Valley Goose Bay. 9 degrees in Quebec City and 8 in Montreal. Clear and 10 degrees in Toronto and 0 degrees in North Bay. 3 degrees in Wawa and -6 in Sioux Lookout. Churchill's looking at -12 and 3 degrees and clear in Puckawagan. Snow and -2 in Barons River and snow and -2 in Winnipeg. Clear and -6 in Regina and 0 for North Battleford. Clear and 2 degrees in Buffalo Narrows, and Stony Rapids is looking at 4 and clear. As we make our way west, clear and 6 in Fort Chippewa and 9 degrees in Grand Prairie. Clear and 7 in Edmonton and clear and 11 in Calgary. 10 degrees in Vancouver and 12 in Bella Coola. 8 degrees in Smithers and 12 in Fort Nelson. Some snow and -3 in Beaver Creek and 5 degrees in Whitehorse. -2 in Norman Wells and 3 degrees in Yellowknife. Snow and -10 in Fort McPherson and -2 in Colville Lake. Cambridge Bay is looking at snow and -6 and -21 in Chesterfield. -25 in Arctic Bay and -17 in Iqaluit.
There have been many incidents recently ranging from fires to states of emergencies within Indigenous communities. So this week on In Focus, we took a look at emergency situations, the response times, and the resources available to communities in these situations. Take a look.
Unfortunately, people in First Nations are 10.2 more times likely to die from fire.
What are we waiting for? Are we waiting for death? Like, we're not the only nation in this situation.
Yeah.
We have many First Nations that do not have the proper training, proper equipment, proper facilities, and this is a priority.
We don't ever try to criminalize anybody. What we're doing, with assisting the community with the BCRs against drugs and alcohol, RCMP are the last resort. We almost never call the RCMP unless we absolutely have to. And we've been very fortunate. There's been no violence directed towards us.
We all know the challenges in our communities, but we want to see what more can be done. And within the next 2 years, we'll develop a report that will go back to our communities, to the community members and the leadership that we have there, to see if that's something that they want to engage in, is to have their self-administered policing right at the community level.
Broken Head First Nation in Manitoba is exploring growing traditional wild rice to address food insecurity and income generation. CTV's Mason DePatie reports.
What started as University of Manitoba master's student Uche Nwankwo's research project has grown into tackling one of Broken Head Ojibwe Nation's biggest concerns, food security.
Let the younger generation get involved and know that this is an indigenous food crop. They're proud of it, it's culturally and spiritually connected.
The project is looking to reintroduce wild rice, also known as manumin, back to the First Nation.
The current things happening in the world with inflation and the uncertainty of the times that we're in, that it would be in our best interest as a nation to start producing our own foods and bring our traditional foods back to our land.
The project took 50 pounds of wild rice seeds and scattered it along the river in Broken Head last year, which will be ready to harvest come summer. On Friday, those running the project met with community members to determine what they'll do with the rice.
But that's part of this community cafe, is to discuss what do they want, how do they want it. Is it to harvest through the traditional method and then process through the traditional method?
Broken Head Chief Gordon Blue Sky says the project is just one of the many ways the First Nation is looking to rejuvenate its agricultural spirit.
I think it's a great opportunity for young people to see how food security in action can began in our community. So for me, it's really exciting because of the opportunities that it does provide.
As the project grows, Nwankwo says wild rice could be sold, creating a homegrown economic boost for the First Nation.
There can be a product in the local store. And there can be more employment opportunity, like processing it, branding it, and designing the labels, etc. You know, it grows the economy.
The Edmonton Oilers are in Las Vegas, Nevada tonight for Game 1 of the second round of the NHL playoffs against the number 1 seed Vegas Golden Knights.
Oh, you usually want it, Dad.
And Oilers superfan Magoo led a convoy yesterday across Edmonton to pump up the city for the Best of 7 series with a live DJ, music, and a free barbecue here at their first stop at the Sobeys in Belmont. The crowd and their dogs were wearing their Oilers gear in support of the team. The Oilers and the Maple Leafs are the only 2 Canadian teams left in the playoffs.
We're here because I'm having an Edmonton Oilers convoy the day before round 2, game 1.
What's the series going to be about?
What's the series going to be about? It's going to be lots of scoring, lots of offense, guaranteed. It's going to be a good series, but the Edmonton Oilers are going to take care of business.
All right, that's all we have for you tonight. If you missed anything from today's show, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and catch up there. For all of us here, thank you so much for joining us. Miigwech, Kinanaskmatan. Have a great night.